Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Burn. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by a really tremendous progressive running for a state Senate seat in Pennsylvania, the 27th district to be specific, Michelle Siegel. How you doing, Michelle?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for taking some time to chat with me about your race. It's an interesting one. There are progressives running all around the country. We have, we've had some good pickups. We've had some, gut-wrenching losses. But there are a lot of opportunities for progressives to flip seats, to unseat corporate Democrats, Republicans, et cetera, et cetera. You're running in the PA Senate, like I said, District 27. The incumbent is a Republican, so you're past the primary, and we're going into the general in November. And I want to talk about, your background, your platform, how terrible he is, kind of the usual. But let's start with your background. Like, what's your professional background? What inspired you to run?
So I guess I'll give you a little bit of a story because it's all connected. So my grandmother is part Native American. She used to take me for walks in the woods. She was a big conservationist. She would teach me to pick tea berries. She could pick walking sticks off of trees, and it just, blew my mind as a child. I thought it was magic, And so we spent a lot of times in the woods, and so the relationship with the environment was very strong with me. And the one day she took us all the way to this top of the mountain, and there were trees, and I get to the top and there's nothing except this water. And I asked her what it was, and she said it was death. Now, when you're a child, that's a pretty striking thing to be told from your grandmother. Yeah. And what I remember is growing up at my grandparents' house, you were not allowed to drink the water. It was so sulfuric when you turned the faucet on, it stung your nose. So we had to drink Tulpahawken water that was provided from the coal company that was delivered to my grandparents' house pretty much daily or weekly. I don't remember exactly, but we were allowed to wash our hands and bathe in it, but you were not allowed to cook or drink with it. So my grandfather ends up getting cancer, colon cancer. He has to have bowel resections throughout his entire life. My uncle starts out with ulcerative colitis, and he was a mechanic. He fell through the cracks of our healthcare system. His bills piled up. They didn't have GoFundMes then, like most of the people in my district. Everybody knows somebody that has a GoFundMe right now for medical bills. Yeah. He didn't have that. And Central PA people tend to have a lot of pride. We don't like asking people for money. So most of my family didn't know his medical bills were building up. He did not seek the treatment he needed, and it turned into cancer, and he died in his early 50s.
Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that.
And for me, it was very hard because I saw firsthand how corporate greed took my uncle's life away. And also the healthcare issues, right? So it was in my veins for a long time that there was something wrong with the system here. And fast forward, finally, when my grandmother passes away, we put the land up in the house up for sale, and the company comes in and says, "I'm sorry, nobody can ever live on this land anymore." And they bought the land. They took down my grandparents' house, and it now sits empty. And now my family is, how bad was that? Should we not even been there at all, right? Now you're wondering, and we've talked to a local farmer that shares right near this ash pit. He's having the same issues. So this has been very personal to me. And so I majored in environmental science. That's the path I took. I do a lot of work with children. I went into youth leadership, and then I also help with a summer program. I run the music theater program for a summer camp for kids, and then I actually wrote a musical on climate change that the kids did. It was called Alice in Climate Land, so it kind of took the story of Alice in Wonderland and educated them on climate change. Great. So that's the kind of stuff I've been doing. And then about a year ago, when I was youth leader and I was working with these children, and I'm seeing them all get wrong, and they're so happy, all I kept thinking about is my childhood and what happened to my family. And I looked at some of them, and I know that some of their families are dealing with similar situations. Might not be exact, but they're suffering from a system that's letting them down. Yeah. And I went home to my husband and said, I want to run for office. And that conversation was interesting because he's like, it's pretty crazy. Democrats don't run in this district, right? That's not a typical thing people do. But we both decided it would be the best thing to do for the people here. They need real representation. They need a government that is of by for the people, and not the corporations and special interests that are bankrolling Harrisburg, because that's what's happening down there.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. And that's, that's the intention of our government right on the outset, is to have citizen representation, right? Rather than sort of a corporate owned, puppet, if you will. Right. So, and there's, we should say right out of the gate, like, you don't take any corporate PAC money. I imagine on these issues, like, you're incorruptible, right? Because you have a personal motivation. So, thanks for sharing that story. I'm sorry to hear about the loss of your family, and what a great way to honor them as well. To advocate for the next, right, to try to prevent it from the next. So let's talk about the PA State Senate. So what's the current makeup? Party wise, tell me about the incumbent.
So I believe the majority party is Republicans in the state House and the state Senate. I think the Senate is 4 seats away from flipping. So it's doable. And what's interesting is there's been a lot of stuff. There's a bunch of Democratic senators that I have learned to really respect down in Harrisburg. And I've spent since last summer, when I decided I wanted to do this, I started watching sessions, right? Seeing what's going on down there. And I've learned when there's about 8 of them. If one of them is upset about something, I always look into that bill. And there's something usually very shady about it. And I started to notice straight off the bat, what's going on down there is they are not doing anything to help the people. These Democrats were pushing for PPE, hazard pay, for special assistance for small businesses, was not getting passed. But when they just left out for session a couple weeks ago, you know what bill they did pass? A bill that gives a tax break and subsidies to their donors. And they made sure they passed that before they left. And that's what's going on down in Harrisburg. And I don't think enough people necessarily know, because I think a lot of people just watch national politics and they don't actually know what's happening in their backyard and what's probably affecting them even more legislative wise than what's happening federally sometimes. And I mean, the guy I'm running against, Mr. John Gordner, he literally just voted to change the definition of pollution so that his donors can dump fracking water into my rivers. And this is what's happening here. Childhood cancer is going through the roof in Pennsylvania. Asthma is going through the roof. Our environment is extremely neglected down there, and it's not a lot of people don't, in my district, right? They don't necessarily see climate change or stuff directly impacting them, so they don't want to hear about it. But when I start talking about, this is your hunting lands, this is your fishing lands that are being taken from you, this is your farmland, that's a different conversation, because that's the other thing that's happening. We have a lot of these people in our legislature, especially the Republican Party in Pennsylvania, that loves to say they're pro-farmer. I don't see that. But in Pennsylvania, farmers are committing suicide through the roof, especially the dairy industry. They're losing land to eminent domain because the fracking industry is putting lines through, and they're losing that land. And they have no protection. They have no help. It's time that we start actually having people that, I see these problems. I know these people. My campaign manager is a family, was dairy farmers. So I know what's going on. Yeah. And we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I want to, amazing on all that stuff. I want to look at your district, right? Because, sometimes districts are ridiculously gerrymandered as a form of voter suppression, right? Yours isn't one of the more insane ones, but so this is PA 27, right? This is kind of central PA. Can you talk about sort of the big cities? What's your district? This is the Susquehanna running through the center, right?
Yeah, so the Susquehanna River goes through the majority of it. So it's Snyder County, Northumberland County, Montour County, Columbia County, and then they gerrymandered the reddest part of Luzerne in that district. It actually used to have Dauphin County, but when they redistricted, they pushed it up and took part of Luzerne. It is a district that has been gerrymandered for a Republican to sit there as long as they want. That is why it exists this way. The big major towns are in Snyder is like Mifflinburg, Selinsgrove. That's where Susquehanna University is, if people are familiar with that. In Northumberland, we have Shamokin, we have Sunbury, Elysburg. In Montour, Danville, that's a big one. That's where Geisinger Medical Center is in Pennsylvania, the main hub. And then Columbia, Berwick, Benton, Bloomsburg. We have Bloomsburg University there. And then the little bit of Luzerne there's not too much there. Drums is there, but that's more of a rural area. There's not too many huge towns in that area.
Right on. Is that Luzerne, where the Shaheen Mackey?
Yes.
Yes. Is that in your district? That's over
That's
there?
not in the district, but my campaign is behind the scenes helping to organize for some of that stuff, because that was heartbreaking. I was on a call where we talked to the lawyer and stuff about what was going on in that situation. For those that don't know, this prisoner was basically killed by the guards there, and it's hard to watch. I believe Sean King did retweet it recently, shared it. It's hard to watch. Yeah.
So, but that's not in your district, but you're advocating.
That's not exactly district, but it's. I mean, Luzerne is part, and again, the way rural is, we have counties, but we drive everywhere anyways. So it's not like we don't see it the way maybe more of a city area or urban area would see. We're all connected. We're all trying to work together here.
Right on. Let's talk about some of the issues in your district, right? So you obviously talked about, how climate change affects the Susquehanna industry there. As I understand it, I saw on your website, I think you said 3 out of 5 counties in your district lives below the poverty line. Can you talk about, why that is and what you would do differently than this? The incumbent, we should say, has been there for 17 years. And before that, 11 years in the House. So he's one of those take corporate money. He's a careerist. And I guess the rumor is he has eyes on the next step up or whatever. So, talk about that poverty issue within your districts.
Well, the other thing we just were looking at through the census data, and that's been coming in, and most of all the counties are even below the median income for Pennsylvania, which is around 59,000 something. And I believe Snyder County is the closest at 57. They all are at high unemployment right now. The issue is rural. It's my district, but this is a lot of rural areas, right? We are losing jobs like crazy. We just had a hospital close its doors. They asked to get out of paying taxes, and then they were denied. And it's UPMC, so I'm sure some people watching this know UPMC is not the greatest they don't treat their employees that great, and they have a history of shutting down hospitals. So they had bought in Sunbury Hospital in a deal with another hospital. I mean, looking at it, I don't think they ever really intended to leave Sunbury open. Talking to the nurses and stuff, UPMC promised everything and ended up all they did was change the toilet paper rolls and the paper towel roll hangers, right? That's the amount of investment they put in. So we lost this hospital. They announced at the end of last year that they were closing. They closed the ER January, I think it was 21st, and then they officially closed their doors March 31st. Northumberland County had their first case of COVID March 17th. So in the middle of a pandemic, we are down 63 hospital beds. Over 150 people lost their jobs. And this was a hospital that was in the community for 125 years. This is a place where I went in the middle of the night. If I was sick, mom and dad threw me in the car, you went to Sunbury. Sunbury was a good location for a lot of these counties in this district to get to in emergency. And some of the nurses were saying, look, a lot of these people don't even have cars. And now that this hospital is closing, how are they going to get somewhere? We don't have public transportation here. This is another big issue. And so if you need to get to a hospital, you're either going to have to find somebody to take you if you don't have transportation, or you're going to have to call an ambulance, which in a lot of cases is a fortune for a lot of people. So that happened. And then last spring, we had a major employer shut its doors, had no regard for its employees. The police just showed up one day and the police were there and they were told the business was closed. There was issues with the employer paying for their insurance somewhat long afterward. A lot of these employees, they lost their job and then they were getting out of network bills. And so, and again, it also has allowed my campaign to start having the conversation about unions and why unions were important, because the only people that were protected in the closure of that facility were the 7 to 8 Teamsters. They had the protection. The rest of the employees, have been struggling. And in all of these cases, where is our state senator? He wasn't standing by the employees. He wasn't standing by the nurses who are crying their hearts out, petrified that somebody's going to die now because they lost access to care. And this issue is going through the whole district. I mean, people are closing their doors. There's not jobs. It is, most people do have at least a high school education, but there's, not much. It's a lot of blue collar people, right? That's the type of people in this district. And we got a big brain drain going on too, because we don't have the young work base to move in, to build into the taxes and to buy houses as elderly are, moving on. And that's starting to become a big problem here too. It's starting to become a mini Rust Belt right here, in central Pennsylvania, and it doesn't get talked about enough. And we need to start doing something we need to start bringing in broadband, because a lot of businesses small businesses I talked to said, I'm questioning if I won't even stay here. I don't have reliable broadband. And what is that doing to keep more businesses coming in? If they know that they don't have internet service available, if they know there's not a good workforce building up, this is all spiraling, right? And that's the problem.
Yeah, there's intersectionality across all those issues. You talk about the hospital closing, and just looking back on the national presidential race, anyone advocating for Medicare for all, which there was only one candidate, it was inevitably, well, how are you going to pay for it? It was so anti-Medicare for all, and it was all about cost. But the cost is, if you have a for-profit hospital in a rural area, and they just decided those 63 beds weren't, they were in the red rather than the black, it's just some numbers, and the hospital closes, and the citizens, the constituents in that district, what options do they have, right? And they have to see that. They have to be aware of, especially during a pandemic, as you mentioned, right? I keep saying in all these interviews I'm doing, reality is endorsing progressive policies like Medicare for all, like, Green New Deal based policies like you're talking about, right? And I think before we jumped on here, you said this is an R+21 district, right? But, how do they not feel that when their hospital closes down? What is John Gordner done about it, right? He was at the helm when it closed, right? So sorry to get on my soapbox there a little bit, but
no, you're right.
It's a bit of a maddening thing, and I was looking at the primary numbers, and I wanted this bit horse race kind of question, but it is, like you said, it's a strongly Republican district, and in a primary you got about 15,000 votes, and he got about 27,000, right? So how do you close that gap? How do you reach people? So
nobody's run against him since he initially ran for state senate in a special election in 2003. The interesting part of that is that he was a registered Democrat when he was in the House, flips to Republican basically because the Republican incumbent said, I would endorse you if you switch to Republican, then would often go to Democrats and say, I'm still a Democrat at heart, vote for me. Meanwhile, he's moving up the GOP food chain, right? He is the definition of a career politician. So a lot of times around election time, he would say to Democrats, I'm a Democrat at heart, don't run somebody against me. This is what was happening. So it's been very hard to find data on that race because it doesn't exist. Right. So we decided in the primary, we've been working on this campaign since the beginning of last fall, but we wanted to go into this primary really cold. Some voters knew who I was, especially in my county. But we didn't want to do too much phone banking because I wanted to know what was the voters, not looking at the turnout of numbers, but what were voters looking at between my name and down, or the president and down ballot and the Republican president and down ballot. The drop off between my name and his name was significant. He had a lot bigger drop off on the ballot than I did. And so that was very interesting to see. And in some cases, in the reddest part of some of these counties, the reddest precincts, some of the people went in and just hit president and myself and walked out, which was also very interesting to come across. So looking at, and the person that did our data analysis, they think it's at this point it's more like an 8-point race based on down ballot drop off, turnout. Again, Democrats are not great at turning out in primaries. It's just the reality of the situation. But there is a fire in this area to turn out, obviously, for the general or vote by mail if that's the way they choose to vote. So it's not difficult. We have a set number of Republicans we're going to work on to flip. We have a set number of independents we're going to work on to flip. And, speaking to some of these independents, they're right here with me on policy, right? They understand what's going on and what needs to be addressed. And many of them understand that Harrisburg hasn't been doing that. I mean, in the middle of a pandemic, they went and cut a nursing loan forgiveness program to nurses in Harrisburg during a pandemic when these people are on the front lines risking their lives every day. They cut a nursing loan forgiveness program. And what is that going to do? Who's going to want to work in Pennsylvania when the surrounding states have a similar program? You just decentivized working and staying in Pennsylvania. Right. It's sad.
Yeah, it's maddening. And the back to your lovely story about your grandmother, you weren't the only family that's gotten that bottled water, right? Everyone in that district has felt that pain. So, you would hope after 17 years there'd be a bit of a thirst for change, like you were talking about the data, right? Whether they recognize your name or didn't recognize your name, they were leaning towards change. In other words, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I want to share your website because your website is awesome too. Let's see if I can do that here. There it is. So a thing I love about your website, obviously you can donate. So it's Michelle Siegel for PASenate.com. Please go throw Michelle a couple dollars. I'm assuming you could use some volunteers as well.
Absolutely.
In some form or fashion. Yeah. So go help Michelle out. But the thing that I really liked was on issues, you really explicitly outline them, but you have bills to watch, which, a lot of candidates don't go to this extent. So, you actually have bills that you've read, presumably, right? And, ones that you support. And these are bills that are currently in the PA Senate, right? So these are the ones that you would vote for. And then these are the ones that you would vote against, right? And it's got, there's a farmers bill, there's criminal justice reform, wage bills, labor bills, employment bills, unemployment, safety bills, family medical leave. Are there any of these that you want to, you could probably talk all day about each of these, but just give me like one or two that you want to highlight that you think are important that people know about that you support.
A lot of these are under what they call the Workers' Bill of Rights, which is what labor is advocating for in Pennsylvania. So a lot of these would fall to help secure better labor negotiations and wage issues and stuff in Pennsylvania. So just to broadly talk about that, I think these for me are labor issues are very important to me. I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough at the state level, and it's something I'm very advocating for. That's why a lot of those are on there. The other thing that we're going to be rolling out, and we just talked to our guy that does our website today, my campaign is working on a rural Bill of Rights. So it's 10 things that rural people have been complaining about for the last, I don't know, probably forever. Since right. Forever, right? So right. It's things that my community has been complaining about for a long time. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to kind of be revamping this, and we're going to go through each of the 10 rights, and then we're going to put either how the legislature has voted against that right or has done nothing to support that right, and then what I would propose to fix it. So real quick to run through them. The first right is access to hospitals and healthcare, which we went through with the issue of Sunbury and stuff. Rural people have to drive everywhere, and we call it the extraction state. right? Everything that we have in rural is slowly being extracted from, and we're paying the price, and we have to drive further, and our access is decreased. Number two is
sorry to interrupt, but that would also, you might be on there, but I'm assuming there's also food deserts, right? Like when I've been in that part of the state, you might have a Dollar General as your grocery store, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yep. Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're right. No, you're right. I mean, everything is spread out. It's not, when you want to go to the store, you want to go shopping, it's a full day trips. And my campaign manager and I were talking about that, even to go to a specialist in rural. If you want to go to state college for a specialist, you're probably you're gonna have to take the entire day off work. That's the problem here. It's not sustainable. Number two is access to broadband and cell phone service. I mean, this is something that rural people have been complaining about for a long time. COVID has highlighted that flaw to the 100th extent. And the issue is, it's not only broadband, it's cell phone. I've talked to a number of families that when we were in the lockdown and people couldn't go to school, some families just stopped educating their kids because they didn't have a reliable broadband. They just gave up. And it's not their fault. It's just the infrastructure is not there. Right. Number three, access to public transportation. We basically have none here. That it is a huge issue, and is something that some organizations in the area are trying to remedy. But there is really no public transportation. Okay, number 4 is investment in public education. Pennsylvania is ranked 46th nationally in how the state funds public education. It is embarrassing. So that needs to be fixed. I mean, I can spend probably an hour talking about the issue between charter schools getting our public school funding from the state. And again, I guess, people are allowed to have choice, but if you're not following the same guidelines as our state schools are, you shouldn't be receiving that money. Number 5, protection and growth of family farms. Again, a lot of them are suffering. This is out of control with the eminent domain, losing land, and they want to be local. They want to be sustainable. And I think there's a lot we could do there to build in communities. Number 6 is access to jobs and worker protections. Again, we talked about how jobs are fleeing from this area, and the worker protections is, again, going through those workers' bill of rights. So those bills, if you want to look, and that I support to help protect our workers, especially, again, highlighted in COVID, many of our essential and frontline workers have not been properly taken care of. Yeah. Infrastructure investment, that's a huge issue. Pennsylvania pays a lot of money on that wholesale gas tax, where I think that was Act 83. I could be wrong but again, there's a wholesale gas tax in Pennsylvania where they they took away the cap on how much it could be taxed. And in some areas it's through the roof. And then we're not seeing that was supposed to go to infrastructure, and we're not seeing those repairs. We've got a ton of potholes here. We have some change, but even PennDOT has come out and said, we don't have the money to fully fund this. And, a lot of this is coming out of working people's pockets. And where's that infrastructure that we were promised? Support of local businesses, again, extremely highlighted through COVID, but it's something that I've seen for a long time. Pennsylvania, 74% of corporations pay no net income tax. Our small businesses pay that tax. That is not a free and fair market, and it's something, the Delaware loophole, for those who are watching, if you don't know anything, I would look into that. It is what allows many of these businesses in corporations in Pennsylvania not to pay this tax, and working families and small businesses are paying it, and it would bring at least $3.9 billion in revenue back into the state if we repealed that. Support of local business. I just said that. Okay. Access to clean air, water, and land. Again, what happened to my family, it's happening to a lot of families. I think the Attorney General had just released a report where he was talking about how he's suing the fracking industry, and he was sharing stories about how kids are waking up in the middle of the night with blood gushing from their nose that live near these wells. And it's a problem. Yeah. And again, Pennsylvania is one of the only places. Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. Okay.
Pennsylvania is one of the only places, one of the only states in the country that has a place in the Constitution where we actually have a constitutional right to clean air and water. So it's Article 1, Section 27. Most states don't have that. So literally when they're infringing on your rights, you can make that constitutional argument. And then number 10 is upholding of the PA and US Constitution. Again, addressing some of these rights that they are voting against.
Yeah, they're sort of trampling on. Exactly. Yeah. So, I'd love to have you back on. So the election is November 3rd. So we got a couple of months here, and I'd love to have you back on and we can kind of go through
Okay.
that again with a little bit more detail, because I think that's tremendous. Aurora Bill of Rights. And, back to that point, right at the top, the incumbent has been there 17 years, 28 years if you count his House race. His ideology just goes with the wind and the donors, right? And you hear Michelle listing the bills that she would fight for, the ones she would fight against, taking the initiative to come up with this Aurora Bill of Rights. I mean, Godspeed. I hope we can get you into that seat, right? Because we need public servants serving the public like yourself. So I think that's tremendous. I'd love to go into that a little bit more. So again, it's November 3rd. We got a little bit of ways. Assuming there's going to be some mail-in ballots, hopefully. And it's Michelle Siegel for PASenate.com. And I like that your Twitter, you've got SenatePA.com. So that's a little more streamlined, which is pretty cool. Anything else you want to hit on before we say goodbye this time around? I think you're tremendous. Anything I can do in Daily Burn to help you,
And
I'm all in.
Just to publicize, we're going to actually have an event September 17th, which is Constitution Day, at the Capitol, where we're going to present the Rural Bill of Rights and kind of call out the legislature and the majority party for not defending them. So if you want more information and you want to help, we're going to get the people behind this. And I'd love to see, we got to stay within the 250, but if you're interested, let me know and we can get you. And we're also going to do a online Facebook sign up, similar to like a Move On petition, where people can sign up online too, and we'll live stream it on Facebook as well, the event.
Awesome. So it's Michelle Siegel for PASenate.com. Go find her on Twitter, Facebook. I think I saw you're on Instagram. You're on all those things that the kids do today. Throw a couple of bucks. This is a seat that we can win. Like you said, he's never faced a serious challenger. Reality is endorsing your platform. People in your district are feeling the pain. So, it's a change year. So, let's get the wind at your back and hopefully pick up the seat. So, so thank you, Michelle, for taking that. I mean, first off, thank you for running. Thank you for all your advocacy and all your research. And, like I said, breaking out all those bills you're supporting on your website is an awesome, awesome thing. And thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And everybody, again, follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and visit our website. This is a people-powered campaign, and we'd love to have you donate or volunteer.
Right on. Cool. I'll talk to you again, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you.